Hey, lovely people, it's Miss Lockhart. How you doing? How you doing? We are going to end our segment with measures of central tendency, counting principle, and combinations, and we are going to move back to factoring. So today will be an entire lesson on factoring review. Let's get started. Remember that all assignments can still be submitted. If you haven't done so already, please go back and complete any missing assignments from quarter 3 or from the e-learning quarter. It will really help your grade. Remember that e-learning is 50% of your total grade. You definitely need to be using your Riverside High School email address. If you are not, you will notice that when you go and click on the IP, it tells you that you need access, and then most likely you'll email me and say, hey, Miss Lockhart, I need access to this document. And then I'll email you and say, hey, you're not using your Riverside email. Do you know it? And if you don't, I'll help you figure that out. But you must use your Riverside email in order for you to have access to our IPs. Remember that I will be entering your grades out of 10 points. So for today's IP, you will see that you can earn up to 46 points. But your score in your score in Power School won't be out of 46 points. It'll be out of 10 points. And so basically, I'll just take the number of points that you get right out of 44 and I'll divide it. And then I'll move the decimal to the right one place and round it. So if you get a 7, that's a C. If you get an 8, that's a B. If you get a 9 or above, that's an A. If you get anything lower than a 7, that's an NG, and you should definitely redo that at no penalty to you. My office hours are Monday through Thursday from 10 to 11. My haiku page has the link there for you. If you feel like you need more one-on-one time and you feel like office hours with other people is just too distracting, no problem at all. Just send me an email and we'll set up a private office hour, okay? Shout out to Elisha Hall and Stacy Carrick for doing just that. They emailed me and asked me if I was available at other times, and I absolutely was, and we were able to definitely get a lot done. Okay, shout out to y'all. Nice job. Struggles or celebrations. Thank you so much for adding these onto your IPs. I definitely read these and respond to them. Either I send you a separate email or I respond to you on the IP sheet and then I resubmit the IP to you. I know a lot of us are just feeling kind of similar. We've been away from our friends, maybe some of our family, and even just our school family for almost a month now. And it's just really difficult to do that. We all know that like we're doing the right thing and that like it's good for us not to be around each other to stay safe. But also that's not always the easiest thing to do. And I'm certainly in that same boat. So who do you miss the most right now? Let me know. This same question will be on your IP, and I will definitely read that once you enter it in. Please, 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 in order to be successful, I need you to complete all of your lessons in order. Okay, I really appreciate your hard work so far. Make sure you watch the video before you complete the IP. So don't skip over the video, don't skim through the video because the video will really help you with the IP. Okay. Make sure you also take notes. So at this time, if you do not have a pencil and paper, I need you to stop here and I need you to go find some paper and a pencil because you're going to need to take notes. And when I tell you to practice, please actually practice. You need the practice to help you with the IP. You need the practice also to learn the skills. Remember, we're not in class together. You can't see me do examples on the board. You can't ask me to redo it in front of you. We just don't have that opportunity. But what we do have the opportunity to do is you have the opportunity to watch a video, which means you can pause, you can go back, you can fast forward if you need to, and that's also really helpful, okay? So really try those practice problems when I tell you to. If you are not happy with the grade that you get after you submit an assignment, no problem. Email me for help, and I will help you, and then you can submit the assignment for a better grade. So basically you get second chances, which is pretty awesome. I am grading these IPs on correctness. Okay, so if you noticed last week that you earned a 3 or a 2 or maybe a 4 or 5 or 6, basically a 7 or below, that is not a passing. Excuse me, not 7 or below. You can get a 7. So a 6 or below, that's not passing. So what you need to do is either retry the assignment or please come to my office hours or email me. I'll help you and then you can resubmit it. Okay? So please don't put IDK or 0 on your answers. If you do that, that is not correct and that will be counted wrong. All right, so something new that I'm going to start doing. I'm noticing that some students are trying to do the IP without watching the video first. This is not a good idea. So to help encourage you to watch the videos for each lesson, I am going to include a code word that I will ask you about on your IP. I will say the code word somewhere in the video, and you are going to have to write it down on your notes paper that you have in front of you so that you can have that word to enter on your IP when it asks you for the code word for the day. So whenever I say the code word, and I will make sure it's clear to you that it's the code word, you're going to write it down on your note paper so that you have it for later. Okay? So let's give this a try. So this weekend, I decided to enjoy the nice weather. And I even, today, which is Sunday, I went out and ran in the rain, and it was pretty cool. So the code word for today is the word run. So please write down on your paper code word and then write run. That way you have this word. So when you go to complete your IP, I'm going to ask you, what is the code word for today? And all you're going to type is this word run right here. This tells me that you watched the video and that you didn't skim through it. Now, today, yeah, obviously I put the code word at the very beginning of the PowerPoint, okay? That's only because this is the first day that I'm doing this and I want you to have a good idea of what the video code word might look like, okay? But moving forward, it won't be the first slide. It will just be somewhere mixed in with the practice problem somewhere within the video, okay? So make sure you pay special attention to that. All right, so right now, please pause this video and complete the bell work below. Remember, it's really important to keep practicing these problems so that you don't forget everything while we are gone. I will go over solutions if you get stuck. So what we're going to do is find the magic numbers. Identify two numbers that when find the magic numbers. So identify two numbers that multiply to be 6 and add to be 5. So you should have gotten 6, and we need two numbers to multiply to 6 and add to 5. Well, those numbers would be 2 and 3. Okay. Find the magic numbers. Identify two numbers that multiply to be -8 and add to be 7. So we have -8, and we need these to equal 7. So we'll have -1, and we'll have a +8 as our magic numbers. What about identify two numbers that multiply to be -12 and add to be -1? So we'll have -12 on top two magic numbers need to add to -1 and multiply to -12. Those would be a +3 and a -4. Lastly, number 4, identify two numbers that multiply to be 15 and add to be -8. So multiply to 15 and add to be -8. We will get -3 and -5. Great job. All right, so factoring review. Let's get started with this very, 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 very important review. It's important that you understand today's lesson before we move forward. So before I can teach you anything new, you must understand how to factor. If you do not know how to factor, then the next few lessons that come after today will be very, very difficult, maybe even impossible to do. So, because I understand that factoring is going to be required in our next lessons, I wanted to do a review, and I would love to get started now. So what is factoring? Factoring is just dividing a number into its smallest pieces. So we can factor whole numbers to demonstrate the concept. So if I wanted to break the number 54 into smaller pieces, I need to find two numbers that multiply to 54. Okay, there are multiple options, but I'm going to choose 2 and 27. Okay, so now 54 is broken down into two numbers, okay, two smaller pieces. Now I want to look at those two pieces, and I want to determine if I can break those down anymore. Well, I can break down 27 to 3 and 9. So now I've broken down 54 into even smaller pieces, and I can now break down 9 into 3 and 3. Okay? So if I wanted to write down the factors of 54, I would write all of my prime numbers. So I have 2 times 3 times 3 times 3. Okay, those are the factors of 54. Now you try. Go ahead and pause, and I want you to factor 18. Welcome back. So, if we want to break down 18, we can choose 6 and 3 or 2 and 9. I'm going to choose 2 and 9. Okay? If you choose other numbers, so if you choose 3 and 6, don't worry, you will still get the same factors at the end. We can break down 9 to 3 and 3. And now we need to write down all of the prime numbers from the tree. So we'll have 2 times 3 times 3. So these are the factors of 18. So suppose we know that the area of a rectangle is 12. Since the area of a rectangle can be found by multiplying length times width, we can use factoring to find some possible lengths of sides. Okay, so this here has a side length of 1, and there are 12 units on top. This one we have 3 rows, so this is the number of rows and the number of columns. So we have 3 rows here and 4 columns. And we have 2 rows here and 6 columns. Okay. So there must be some way to narrow down what the two numbers should be. Suppose I knew that the area was 12, but the length and width should add to be 7. Now I can find the magic numbers. So, for instance, if I know I have 3 rows and I know I have 4 columns and I know that this area here should be 12, I know that I need to multiply these two numbers here to get 12, and I need to add them to get 7. Okay, those magic numbers are going to be 4 and 3, the length and the width. Okay, so this is just an application. I just want to show you that this is something that you can use in real life. So this process becomes more complicated if I don't have a whole number for the area, but instead have an expression. So suppose I know that the expression for the area of a rectangle is 2x squared plus 3x minus 8x minus 12. I need to find the two factors of the expression. Okay, there are already 4 terms. So it's not necessary to find the magic numbers. Okay, all we would need to do is literally factor by grouping. Okay, so I know that the area here should be 2x squared plus 3x minus 8x minus 12. And I need to figure out my term here and my term here. To do that, I'm going to factor by grouping. So let's group the first 2 terms together, and then the last 2 terms together. Remember that plus sign always goes in the middle. I can take out an x from the first 2 terms. And when I take out an x from 2x squared, I'm left with 2x. And when I take out an x from 3x, I'm just left with 3. Okay. Plus, I can take out a minus 4 from negative 8x and negative 12. And I'm left with 2x plus 3. Okay. We know we did this correctly because we have the same terms inside of our parentheses. So if we write down our factors are 2x plus 3 and x minus 4. Okay, so what we have here is our information for our diagram. So 2x plus 3 would go here, and x minus 4 would go here. Okay, so if we know the area that we want, which was given in the problem, then we can factor by grouping to find the particular length of our sides. Okay. So, factoring by grouping. When we have 4 terms, it's not necessary to find magic numbers. Since we already have 4 terms, we can just group and then factor out the common factors. Don't forget to pause and try the second problem on your own. So feel free to keep it playing while I do example 1, and then I'll let you try example 2 on your own. So we'll have our first 2 paired, 3x squared plus 15x. And then we're going to pair our second 2, negative 4x minus 20. Okay. Remember, a plus sign always separates my 2 groups. I can take out a 3x from my first pair, which means I'm dividing both of my terms by 3x. And I'll be left with x plus 5. Okay. In my second group, I can take out a negative 4. And when I do that, I'm left with x plus 5. Okay. I have the same values inside of my parentheses, so I know this is correct. So let's go ahead and write down our factors. Our factors are going to be, well, one of them is x plus 5. I can cross x plus 5 out so I can see what's left. And I have 3x and a minus 4. Okay. All right, stop the video and go ahead and try example 2. Welcome back. So we're going to group the first two together. So 2x squared plus 3x. And then we're going to group the second two, negative 8x minus 12. I can only take out the greatest common factor from the first two. And that greatest common factor, what they both have is an x. When I take an x away from 2x squared, I'm left with 2x. And when I take an x away from 3x, I'm left with 3. Okay? Plus, I can take out a negative 4 from negative 8x minus 12. And when I take out negative 4 from negative 8x, which is simply dividing negative 8x by negative 4, I get a 2x. And a negative 12 divided by negative 4 gives me a positive 3. Okay, so again, we have matching values in our parentheses, which is exactly what we want to get. So we'll have our factors of 2x plus 3. And our other one, well, let's go ahead and cross out 2x plus 3 because we've already written that down. And we clearly want to see what's left. So we'll have x minus 4. Okay. Please notice that there is no symbol between my parentheses, and that is on purpose. In your final answer, you should have 2 sets of parentheses with nothing between them. Okay. Remember, when there is no symbol between our sets of parentheses, that means that we are multiplying them. And that's exactly what our factors should be set up as. Okay. All right, here's an application of factoring trinomials. What if we only know that the expression for the area of the rectangle is a trinomial like x squared plus 2x minus 15? Now we must find the magic numbers in order to factor. Okay, so the difference here is now we have 3 terms instead of 4. So I know that the area here is supposed to be x squared plus 2x minus 15. Okay, and I want to find out the side lengths of this rectangle. Well, because I don't have 4 terms, I can't group them right away. What I have to do first is I have to find the magic numbers. Okay, so I have to identify A, B, and C first. Okay, so A is the coefficient in front of x squared. When there's nothing there, we assume it's a 1. Okay, B is the coefficient in front of x, which is 2. And C is that last term. Okay, if I just write 15, I'm incorrect. It needs to be negative 15. Okay, please notice that for my values of A, B, and C, there are no variables. You should not be writing 1x or 2x or negative 15x. They should only be numbers. Okay, so when I find my magic numbers, I need 2 numbers that multiply to give me A times C, which is going to be from our chart here. A times C is 1 times negative 15, which is negative 15. And then it needs to add to give us our B value. Our B value here is 2. Okay, so the numbers that will work for this would be 3 and negative 3, and 5. Okay, negative 3 times 5 is negative 15, and negative 3 plus 5 is 2. So both are satisfied. So now I can place these magic numbers into my equation. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I am going to look at my original equation. And my original equation starts with an x squared. So I'm going to write that first. Okay. Plus, because there's a plus sign next. Now I have 2x. This is where the magic numbers come in. Notice that this here, this b value is equal to 2, which is the same value in my original equation. I'm going to replace 2x with my magic numbers. So I'm going to break down 2x into two numbers that when I add them together, I get 2x. So I'm going to have my negative 3 plus 5. Okay, now I'm missing something very important, and that would be the x's that I need to add behind them. Because when I add negative 3x to 5x, I want to make sure I get 2x and not just 2, because 2x is what's a part of my original equation. And then I add minus 15 onto the back. Okay, so now we have 4 terms that we can factor by grouping. Okay, so I'm going to group my first 2 terms together and my second 2 terms together. Okay, and I can take out an x from my first group here. And when I do that, I'm left with an x minus 3. And from my second pair, I can take out a positive 5. And I'm left with x minus 3 when I do that. Okay, so I need to make sure that what's inside of my parentheses is the same. I need x minus 3 in both, and that's what I have. So that is going to be one of my factors, x minus 3. Once I write that factor down, I'm going to scratch this out so I can clearly see what's left. Okay, so I have x and then a positive 5. Okay, and x minus 3 and x plus 5 are my final factors. Remember, in my final answer, there is nothing in between those parentheses. Okay, nothing at all. Just 2 sets of parentheses right next to each other, and those are called my factors. So now that we are factoring trinomials, so we're factoring 3 terms, we will need to start by finding the magic numbers so that we can replace the value of b. Don't forget to pause and try the second problem on your own. Okay, so we need to find the 2 magic numbers that multiply to a times c and equal b. Well, before we can do that, let's identify what a, b, and c are for this problem. So a is going to be the number in front of x squared, which is just 6, no variables. B is negative 23, no variables. Okay, and c is 20, just 20, no variable. Okay, so a times c would give us 120. So that number goes on the top. Okay, and then we need these 2 magic numbers to not only multiply to 120, but also add to give us negative 23. Okay, well, we are going to have to come up with a list, okay, because this isn't something that might not be immediate that we can think of those magic numbers. Okay, so let's start by just creating a factor tree. So I know that 1 times 120 is 120, but that doesn't add to negative 23. Okay, 2 times 60 is 120, but when I add 2 plus 60, I get 62, not negative 23. So we have to keep trying. 3 times 40, that's 120, but it adds to 43, not correct. 4 times 30, multiplies to 120, but then adds to 34, so not quite. 5 times 24 multiplies to 120, but then adds to 29, so that doesn't work. And then 6 times 20 is definitely 120, but when we add those together, we get 26. Still not that negative 23 that we need. 7 times, yep, nothing. There's nothing times 7 that gives me 120, so I know I probably can just go ahead and see about 8. 8 times a value gives me 120, and that would be 15. Okay, so I know my magic numbers are going to be some variation of 8 and 15. Well, when I add 8 plus 15, I get a positive 23. Okay, so I know I'm going to have to manipulate the signs. If I put a negative on my 8, I get negative 120, which is not the positive one that I need, so I know that won't work. So what happens if I add a negative to both? So I have negative 8 plus a negative 15. Okay, when I do that, I not only get negative 8 times negative 15 is positive 120, but also when I add them, I also get negative 23. Okay, so I found my magic numbers, negative 8 and negative 15. Now you're probably thinking, Ms. Lockhart, do I really have to do all that? Absolutely, yes, indeed. Make your factor tree and find your numbers that way if you're having difficulty, okay? So, back to our original problem because we need to substitute in these magic numbers. So, we're going to have 6x squared because that's the first one. We're going to write that down. And now we need to replace our negative 23x with our magic numbers. Make sure you add an x on the end. So negative 8x minus 15x, okay? And then we'll have plus 20 at the end. So now we can take it away from here and factor by grouping, okay? Remember to include this negative sign in front of the 15. Include that in parentheses. So if you have to erase it like I just did, so that you make sure it's in parentheses, please do so. I'm going to try again. I'm kind of writing sloppy here. Okay. So negative 15x plus 20. And then what goes inside is going to be a plus sign. Hold on, let me fix the color of my parentheses. I need them to be green. There we go. Okay, so I can take out a 2x from 6x squared and negative 8x. When I do that, I'm left with x minus 4. Okay, I can take out a negative 5 from 15x and 20. When I do that, I'm left with an x minus 4. Let's check to make sure that what's on the inside is the same. So I should have an x minus 4 in both cases, which I do. Okay, since both terms have it, that's the greatest common factor, and that's the factor that we're going to take out first. So we're going to have x minus 4 as one of our factors. We're going to cross it out so we can clearly see what's left for our last factor. Okay, we're going to have 2x minus 5. And these are our factors here. Okay, I want you to pause and try example 2 on your own. Okay, welcome back. So, we need to find two numbers that multiply to a times c and add to b. Remember, a is 3, b is negative 19, and c is 20. Okay, so a times c is going to be 3 times 20, which is 60. And we need this to add to negative 19, okay? So let's start by breaking down 60 into two numbers. Well, 1 times 60 is 60, but when I add them, I don't get negative 19. 2 times 30 is 60, but when I add those two numbers, I get 32. That's not negative 19, so that doesn't work. 3 and 20 multiply to 60, but add to 23. Not negative 19, so that doesn't work. 4 and 15 multiply to 60 and add to 19. Close enough. Okay, it's not negative 19, but it is the value 19, so I know I'm close. All I need to do is figure out what I need to do to 4 and 15 so that when I add them, I get negative 19. So if we make both of these negative and we add them together, we'll get a lovely negative 19. And that's exactly what we need. So our magic numbers are going to be negative 4 and negative 15. Okay? So we're going to write down 3x squared first. And we're going to replace negative 19x with our magic numbers. So negative 4. Remember to add the x on the end. And negative 15 with an x on the end. Okay? From here, we can factor by grouping because we have 4 terms. Remember to make sure that your negative sign is inside with your 15. I'm going to erase this again. Yeah, I'm struggling with this iPad thing that I'm writing on. It's not the easiest thing to do. Okay, so it's going to be a plus in the middle because we always know that there's a plus sign in the middle. And that should be green. Okay, so we'll have negative 15 x and then plus 20. Ooh, Charlie, get your life joy. Okay. Plus 20. Boom. Okay. So from our first two, we can take out a value, just an x, and we're left with 3x minus 4. Okay. From 15x and 20, we can take out a negative 5. And when we do this, we're left with 3x minus 4. Okay. We have the same values inside parentheses, so we know we're doing this correctly. Our first factor is going to be what's inside parentheses, which is 3x minus 4. We can cross that out so that we can clearly see what's left. So we have an x and a minus 5. And here are our two factors. Great job. All right, so here's an application of factoring out the greatest common factor. Okay, suppose we have a rectangular prism. The volume of a rectangle can be found by multiplying the length width and, you guessed it, height. So there are now 3 dimensions, which means there must be 3 factors. So suppose we know that the volume of this rectangular prism is 18. Okay. What are the lengths of the sides? So we know that the volume is 18. I need to find 3 lengths. So let's go ahead and break 18 down and see if there are 3 factors. So we can choose 6 and 3 or 2 and 9. Either way, you'll get the same answer. Okay. So the factors, remember, are all the prime numbers. The prime numbers here are 2 times 3 times 3. Okay. Notice we have 3 factors, so we know the lengths of all of our sides. So the height is 2, and this side length is 3, and this side length is also 3. Okay, so we can also find the lengths of sides of things that have 3 dimensions. All right, so suppose we only know that the volume of a rectangular prism can be found with the expression 2x squared plus 2x minus 24. Okay. Is there an integer that all 3 terms can be divided by before we begin factoring? If so, this is one of your factors, okay? Which is why there are 3 factors and 3 dimensions, okay? So, for instance, if I wanted to factor 2x squared plus 2x minus 24. The GCF here, that means what I can divide 2x squared and 2x and negative 24 by would be 2. Okay, so when I take out a 2, I'm going to write that on the outside of my parentheses, and I'll write what's left inside. So I'll have x squared plus x minus 12. Okay, so I'm going to work with my trinomial in green to find my magic numbers. So I need 2 numbers that multiply to negative 12 but add to 1. Okay, that's going to be negative 3 and 4. So I'm lazy, so I'm just going to draw this 2 down to the end. Okay, I know that the greatest common factor has to be in my answer. Okay, and I'm going to set up the parentheses for my factors that I'm going to come up with. Okay, so I'm going to replace my x in the middle with negative 3x and positive 4x, and then minus 12 at the end. We can go ahead and group these first 2 and these last 2 together. I can take out an x from my first pair, and what's left is going to be an x minus 3. And then for my second pair, I can take out a value of 4, so plus 4. And what's left is going to be x minus 3. Okay, perfect. We have x minus 3 here and x minus 3 here. So I know that x minus 3 is one of my factors. I can cross that out to see what's left. X plus 4. Okay, so if I wanted to label my rectangular prism here, I'd have a height of 2. Here would be x plus 4, and this would be x minus 3. Okay. All right, I want us to get some practice with factoring trinomials that have a greatest common factor. Okay, so when you see a trinomial with a common factor, factor it using division of all 3 terms first. Then find the magic numbers. Don't forget to pause and try the second problem on your own. Okay, so we are going to be able to take out a value of 3 from 6, 33, and negative 63. So when we do that, Uh-oh, what happened? We'll have a 3 here, and we'll be left with 2x squared plus 11x minus 21. Okay, remember we're going to draw a line all the way to the end, and we're going to write our 3 here so we don't forget about it. And let's set up our 2-factor parentheses. Okay, so we need to find now two numbers that multiply to a times c, which is going to be negative 42, and add to 11. Okay, let's note here that our GCF was 3, just so we don't forget. So the magic numbers here, well, 1 times 42 will give us negative 42, but it doesn't add to 11, so that doesn't work. 2 times 21 is 42. That doesn't add to 11, so that doesn't work. 3 times 14 multiplies to 42. We need negative 42. So if we put a negative 3 there, now negative 3 times 14 is negative 42. And also negative 3 plus 14 is 11. Okay, so these are our two magic numbers. So we're going to replace our 11x here in our trinomial with negative 3x and 14x, just like this. So we'll have 2x squared minus 3x plus 14x minus 21. We now have 4 terms, so we can factor by grouping. Okay, we can take out an x from our first pair, and we will be left with 2x minus 3 in parentheses. And we can take out a 7 from our second pair, and here we'll also be left with 2x minus 3. Okay, we have 2x minus 3 in both cases, so I know that's going to be one of my factors. Okay, we cross 2x plus 3 out, so we can clearly see what's left. X plus 7 is my other factor. Okay, now I want you to try example 2. Okay, your answer should be 2 times x plus 1, 3x minus 5. Okay, your magic numbers would have to multiply to 15 and add to negative 2. Okay, give it a try. All right, welcome back. So your magic numbers should be negative 5, oopsies, negative 5 and 3. Okay, now I'm sure you can take it away. Do all the steps and you will end up with 2 times x plus 1 times 3x minus 5. All right, last segment. We are going to learn how to, or review how to factor a binomial. Okay, so when you factor a binomial, we are going to start with an expression that only has 2 terms, like 2x squared minus 18. Okay, and when we see that this happens, we are now working with a binomial. Since there is a greatest common factor in the binomial that we saw on the previous slide, which is 2x squared minus 18, now we must factor by replacing b with 0, because we must have a trinomial in order to factor. Okay, so here we only have 2 terms. We don't have 3. So we can't necessarily factor that how it is. Okay, so in order to do this, We have to, first, there's a greatest common factor of 2. So we're going to take out a 2, and we'll be left with x squared minus 9. Okay? But we cannot factor x squared minus 9 because there are only 2 terms. So we have to write it as x squared plus 0x. So we're adding that in. It wasn't there before. Minus 9. Okay? So now we can find the 2 numbers that multiply to negative 9 and add to 0. Okay? So for binomials, is always gonna the values here are always gonna be the same and opposite signs. Okay? So we're gonna have negative 3 and positive 3 here. Okay? So we can replace our 0x with a negative 3x, positive 3x, minus 9. If we factor by grouping, we'll be able to take out an x from the first 2 terms, and we can take out a 3 from the second 2 terms. So our factors are x minus 3 and x plus 3. Okay, I want you to try example 2. Okay, go ahead and pause. All right, so the GCF here was 2. We're skipping this one, by the way. Skip. So in the interest of time, I should say, we're going to skip. So we're left with, we take out a 2, and we're left with x squared minus 16. We're going to drag this 2 to the bottom and set up our 2 factor pairs here. Okay? So what we're working with now is x squared minus 16. We need 3 terms, so we have to slap in a positive 0x between our x squared and negative 16. Now we can find our 2 magic numbers that multiply to negative 16 and add to 0. Remember, the magic numbers for binomials is always going to be the same number and opposite signs. Okay, so we'll have x squared minus 4x plus 4x minus 16. And we will factor by grouping. We can take out an x from the first 2, left with x minus 4. And we can take out a positive 4 from the second 2, and we're left with x minus 4. So one of our factors is x minus 4. Cross that out to see what's left, and we'll have x plus 4. So here is our factored form. Awesome job. You made it. Please go ahead and complete your IP for factoring. Okay? Great work. Nice job. You did it. See you later. See you in office hours. If you need help, if it's after 11 a.m., just send me an email and I'll hop on. Okay? Have a good day.